Ha ha ha. Your cruel interrogation will be remembered forever. Or maybe just until lunch. Lunch makes everything better. Oh look, I have cheese.
Dragon Age Origins was developed by BioWare and it was designed to be a spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Unlike those games which use D&D's Forgotten Realms as their setting, BioWare did all of the world building for Dragon Age on their own. Well, sort of. The game's story and its setting are heavily influenced by The Lord of the Rings and A Song of Ice and Fire, and it uses a lot of common fantasy tropes, topped off by a very generic sounding title.
Quest 64.
There are dwarves, elves, and mages fighting against evil orc-looking creatures to try and save the world from an evil dragon. Even Treebeard shows up to try and launch his rap career.
When I roamed the world and howled with pain, not of this world, but twixt and twain.
There's also a lot of political squabbling and backstabbing over who gets to be the next king. But the story isn't wholly unoriginal or cliché. There are unique and interesting story elements and some entertaining characters.
Yes, I should think so.
It's a massive game. There is a seemingly endless amount of well-written dialogue, plenty of combat, a ton of quests, and a multitude of DLC content. Origins came out back in 2009, but you still might have some issues playing the PC version on modern hardware. There's a memory leak problem with frequent crashes and slow load times. To fix this, you'll need to use a 4GB patch to let the game use more memory. You can patch the game file yourself using NT Core's 4GB patch tool. If you have the Steam version of the game, this tool probably won't work, but there are pre-patched files you can download that work just fine. There's a popular Steam guide which provides one, along with detailed instructions on how to install it. I'll link to both of these in the comments. Using the patch, Origins ran perfectly 99% of the time for me. My game crashed only once while I played the base game. It did crash a few more times while I played the DLC, but overall it wasn't much of a problem. Load times become almost instantaneous. However, I did occasionally run into a problem in Denerim, the game's largest city area, where sometimes I'd encounter longer load times and a noticeable drop in frame rate. This only happened rarely, and a quick restart of the game always fixed it, but it's worth mentioning. Okay, so now let's talk about character creation. My first thoughts were that it looks pretty lackluster for an epic fantasy RPG. You don't have many choices right away, but customization does improve a bit later on once you start leveling up. You can pick from one of 3 basic races, human, elf, or dwarf, and one of 3 basic classes, warrior, mage, or rogue. Each race has its own bonuses, and you get a short description explaining their place in the world. Dragon Age adds a pretty unique twist to distinguish their elves from traditional fantasy elves. They were formerly slaves to humans, and you'll often encounter them living in poverty and enduring racism.
You've a lot of nerve, knife ears.
Dwarves are the only race with a class restriction. A resistance to magic prevents them from being mages. The next screen lets you customize your character's appearance, and you get a decent variety of choices. You can be a crusty old man, a felon, a primped up noblewoman, or something a little more basic. You get to toy around with your character's portrait too, and you can definitely make it look like you drank too much lyrium. You're given a glimpse at the skills and combat abilities which are referred to as talents.
Because you had the talent to become a good fighter.
You can select a few of these right away, and the rest you'll gain access to by leveling. The most intriguing feature of Origins character creation is the background section. Your decision here dictates which unique prologue you play through at the start of the game, and it also influences how some NPCs and party members treat you as the game progresses. Each one introduces you to one of the major groups of people that inhabit Ferelden. That's the name of the kingdom where the game takes place. There are other means to learn about the game world, namely through dialogue and reading your codex, which is a collection of lore entries you accumulate throughout the game, but I felt that the prologues conveyed this information in a much more upfront and immersive way. I wish I'd played all of these before completing my first playthrough, because there was some information that I missed along the way, and things made a bit more sense after I went back and played them. They're each about an hour long, except for Dwarven Noble, which is a bit longer, and if you have the time, they're definitely worth checking out. There's a good amount of variance with their stories and settings, but all of them have one thing in common. Someone, or in the case of the Dale Shelf, something, is out to ruin your day. In one way or another, you end up banished from your home.
Begone!
But you're in luck, because a guy named Duncan shows up to help you out. He's a member of an order known as the Grey Wardens. They're skilled warriors who make it their life mission to fight against orcs, Darkspawn. You end up joining Duncan and the Grey Wardens out of desperation. This is why your character is called the Warden. It makes sense, I guess, but I kind of felt like I should have been running a prison somewhere.
Hey, what the?
You travel with Duncan to a fortress called Ostagar, where you meet Kalen, the king of Ferelden. He's amassed an army to fight against a Darkspawn horde. Darkspawn usually stay underground, and whenever they lead an attack on the surface, it's called a Blight. A Blight only occurs when the Darkspawn discover a hibernating being called an Old God and infect it with the evil taint that they carry. The resulting monster is called an Archdemon. A simpler explanation is that they have a big-ass dragon. Before you're officially a member of the Grey Wardens, you have to go through an initiation ritual called the Joining. You're forced to drink Darkspawn blood, and no one can predict exactly how this will affect you. Maybe you'll feel nothing. Maybe you'll get drunk. Or maybe you'll immediately drop dead like your unfortunate companion. You survive though, because it wouldn't make sense for the game to end here. After this, the battle against the Darkspawn goes terribly because the king is betrayed by his advisor. Nearly everyone dies except for the Warden and Alistair, another Grey Warden. As the only two surviving members of the Grey Wardens, the entire responsibility of the Order falls on you both. Your mission is to go off into the world and recruit allies to aid you in the fight against the Blight. Before I talk more about Origin's story, I want to mention a few things about the audio and visual design. Since there's so much dialogue, the fact that there is voice acting for all of it is a pretty incredible accomplishment. Reports claim that BioWare employed more than 140 voice actors, and some of them you might recognize, like Tim Curry, who voices Arl Howe.
If you think you can take this from me, that I will allow it, you are very much mistaken.
At no point did I feel like any of the performances were subpar, and some of them I really enjoyed.
And apostates could become Maleficarum, evil mages that resort to blood magic and become demon-enslaved abominations. It may even be true, still, those of us who prefer freedom see no reason to submit.
The most likely outcome is that it and its companions will become a stain on some rock for the Darkspawn to tread upon. I shall be moved to a single tear by the tragedy.
Right, because clearly this is all just a misunderstanding. We'll laugh about this later. At any rate, we need to hurry. We need to get up to the top of the tower and light the signal fire in time.
Enchantment!
However, I think that the face animations could have used some improvement. Since you spend so much time in conversations looking at who you're talking to, the bland and sometimes awkward facial expressions become pretty obvious, especially when they're paired with a passionate and emotional voice performance.
Kamen? How dare you!
What? But Dana...
Sometimes they look downright ridiculous. Dragon Age Origins isn't a new game, but there are games just as old or older that do a better job at this. Origins' soundtrack uses an orchestra, occasionally joined by a choir. It sounds a lot like what you'd expect for an epic fantasy game, but sometimes with a slightly darker twist, and it fits well with the tone and atmosphere of the story and setting. When the music played, I usually enjoyed it. There were a few times when the choir made me feel like I was locked in a church or something. But otherwise it sounds good, and I have no major complaints here. Origins graphics are from 2009, and they show their age. But there's a cool feature that lets you switch between third person and a top-down perspective. This is unique to the PC version, and it can be pretty advantageous for certain combat scenarios, especially when you're facing a lot of enemies, which happens quite often. You can zoom out to survey the entire battle area, space out your party, and get a more accurate view of where some ranged and area of effect attacks will land, and then zoom in so you can more easily target individual enemies who are clustered together. Origins' visual style uses a lot of colors that have a brownish tint. This matches well with the gritty and grungy tone that the story aims for, but it doesn't make things any more enjoyable to look at. Don't get me wrong, the environments don't have to be sparkling rainbow utopias for me to appreciate them, but sometimes while I was playing, I felt like someone had literally messed with my monitor's settings. This color scheme wasn't quite as present in some of the interior locations, and I liked viewing these areas much more. Weapon and armor styles and sustained combat talents all show up on your party members. This is great for equipment because there are some pretty cool looking pieces to collect, but it sucks for sustained talents. That's because they'll stay on after combat has ended unless you either waste a tactic slot to try and turn them off automatically, which I couldn't always get to work right, or turn them off manually. Origins can jump back and forth between combat, dialogue, and cutscenes pretty quickly, so it's an easy thing to forget. Having a conversation or watching a cutscene while your party is covered in big pink clouds of smoke looks really silly. Hey, is your clothes on fire or something? Oh wait, we're just gonna ignore this? Okay. Helmets always disappear when you enter a conversation, and I don't understand why this wasn't extended to sustained talents too. Since we're talking about talents, I'll touch on the combat for a minute. The first thing I should mention is that there's a lot of it, a whole hell of a lot. Even when it's running in real time, it has a pretty slow pace to it, so you'll spend a good chunk of time in fights. For the most part, it doesn't throw any surprises at you. It lets you pause at any time to issue commands, you raise your stats by leveling, and you get to choose a couple of subclasses called specializations once you unlock them. There are various methods to unlocking these. Some require you to spend gold or make certain in-game choices. However, once you unlock them, they're bound to your game for good, which means that you can save right before purchasing one from a merchant, and then just reload your game to recoup your money and still keep the specialization.
Cost. I should be paying you, friend.
The most unique feature of Origins combat is its tactics system. Here you get to assign automated behaviors to your party members to determine how they'll react in certain situations, and the wide range of scenarios it encompasses is pretty impressive. Here are some examples. You might want to make it so that each of your party members consumes a health potion or casts a healing spell if their health reaches a certain point. You can also assign different sustained talents to your tank to shield them depending on what kind of attack they're enduring. Then there's the ability to automatically cycle between different attack talents depending on how many or what type of enemies are around you, like unleashing a big two-handed sweep when you're surrounded by multiple enemies, or focusing a powerful attack like Critical Strike on a stronger enemy. It gets more interesting when you start employing combo attacks. If you assign your party's mage to cast a sleep spell whenever enemies are around, then you can immediately follow it up with the horror spell, by assigning a tactic slot for this to be cast on sleeping enemies. This will land the nightmare combo, which deals heavy damage and can't be resisted. Even with the tactic system in play, I still had to take control and micromanage a lot. I did try to let portions of combat play out via tactics, and it can be very satisfying to watch your party unleash a slew of automated attacks effectively. But for the most part, I use the tactic system as a kind of failsafe. If I became really focused on one part of a battle or on one or two party members, I wanted the rest of my party to be at least somewhat effective on their own for a while. And if you set up your tactic slots right, this can work out pretty well. Okay, so now I'll dive into the game's story, and this is really where Dragon Age Origins' heart and soul is. Overall, I enjoyed the story, but although some aspects were well done, I do have a few issues. Like most plots that deal with an apocalyptic scenario, the high stakes of the Warden's mission to save Ferelden from the Blight probably won't have much effect on you as the player. It's nearly impossible to believe that the writers would actually make good on this threat. Imagine playing through the entire game, all 70 hours or more of it, to find out that the Darkspawn win in the end, killing everyone. Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Blight. The writers deal with this problem by shifting the story's focus away from the end of the world scenario, and thrusting you into a bunch of different subplots which surround the main questline. The quests here have much more believable stakes because it's made abundantly clear that your choices have direct consequences. And since the conflicts are smaller, there's a possibility of shocking or brutal outcomes. I found the writing for most of these to be pretty engrossing. You'll deal with things like an innocent child possessed by an evil demon who reaps havoc on nearby citizens, a mysterious disease turning members of an elven camp into werewolves, and dwarves doing dwarven things at a dwarven place. The areas where these subplots unfold all have their own cultures, histories, and secondary conflicts, and I didn't have much trouble getting immersed in them. The side quests are mostly an exception to this. You can find a lot of them scattered around, and story-wise they're usually pretty basic. Most of the time they're worth completing for the experience though, and a few of them were still pretty entertaining.
Mother, no warm blanket and stew and pillow and soft words!
The freedom of choice and the weight of your decisions are the biggest factors in making this subplot so compelling, but I did have a problem with how some of them played out. There are times when you're given a tough choice to make. It can be something like sacrificing a child or his mother, or siding with one of two opposing groups in a conflict where neither party's plight really seems to take precedence over the others. And then the game throws you another option that is so blatantly the correct solution. Unless you already have your sights set on a specific outcome, then it's definitely the best option to resolve the conflict. Everyone lives happily ever after except for the villain who gets an ending he deserves. You usually have to select the correct responses in a conversation or meet some other requirement to get an option like this, but it was never challenging enough to justify such a perfect solution. When these kinds of options were present, I didn't need to think as hard about my decisions because there were basically no negative consequences. That took a lot of the fun and challenge out of it for me. Plus, I didn't like feeling guilty about massacring an entire town. This was a really tough choice, I swear. Not all decision making in the game is like this though, and I still think that overall it's one of the game's better features. Dragon Age Origins is a true role-playing experience where you get to shape the path you take to get to your ultimate goal. It also goes a long way in redeeming itself for these scenarios with the way that its ending sequence unfolds. I won't spoil it here, but I will say that I had to spend some time contemplating the choices that were given once I got to that point. There's also a ton of lore to digest. BioWare put a lot of detail into constructing the world, and probably my favorite aspect of it was how they handle magic and mages. To explain this, I'll use the mage origin story as an example since it covers a lot of the basics. You start out as an apprentice mage who has to complete a test known as the Harrowing, in order to become a full-fledged member of a mage's order known as the Circle of Magi. To do this, you have to enter a realm called the Fade and defeat a demon. The Fade is a spiritual dream realm where mages draw their power from. Since it's inhabited by demons, mages constantly run the risk of demonic possession. Because of this, mages are imprisoned in a tower, and those who roam free are technically fugitives. After you've returned and completed your initiation, your friend Jowan and his girlfriend ask you to help them escape the mage's tower. He's found out that the Circle intends to turn him into a Tranquil, which is a kind of safety measure used to keep certain mages in check. As a side effect, Tranquils lose the ability to feel all emotion, and as you might expect, Jowan isn't really cool with that.
Stripped of emotions and talent, I am no longer dangerous.
After insulting Jowan's girlfriend, he tells you that he needs to find and destroy his phylactery, which is a vial of his blood that Templars can use to track Jowan's whereabouts. Templars are an order of knights whose specific job it is to hunt down illegal mages and watch over the mages in the tower, and kill them at the drop of a hat if they get possessed and become dangerous. To help them resist magic, Templars take a substance called lyrium, which is highly addictive and can make them pretty loopy after a while.
Blessed are they who stand before the corrupt and the wicked, and do not falter.
He doesn't forget who he is, even if he can't remember anything else.
This is a creative setup in a lot of ways, but what I like most about it is the cost of being a mage. They aren't godlike superhero figures that are just better than everyone. They're as vulnerable, if not more so, than everyone else. And when they actually use their abilities, it seems more meaningful since they come at great personal risk. No review of Dragon Age Origins would be complete without discussing the Warden's companions. They play an integral role in the plot, and they're entertaining and well-crafted characters. A few of them stand above the rest, namely Morrigan and Alistair, but they all manage to be memorable in one way or another. Even your pet dog has some entertaining dialogue scenes. Their distinctive personalities provide you with a ton of witty banter, and the vast wells of dialogue that you can plunge into with them really fleshes out their character. On top of this, there are also companion side quests which give them even more depth. Morrigan is an apostate, which is a name given to illegal mages not part of the Circle. She's from an isolated forest swampland where she was raised by her mother Flemeth, a legendary and powerful witch. Morrigan's got mommy issues, to say the least, and that might be partially responsible for her cold, pragmatic view of the world. She likes to chide in whenever she feels like you're wasting too much time on other people's problems.
So, we have come to solve every squabble in the village personally.
Her sardonic wit is responsible for some of the best lines in the game.
Have you never lost someone important to you? Just what would you do if your mother died?
Before or after I stopped laughing.
Right, very creepy. Forget I asked.
Before Alistair became a Grey Warden, he trained to become a Templar. Like Morrigan, he's incredibly sarcastic, but he can also be a bit random too. He has a more traditional moral compass, and sometimes he'll show his more serious side, but usually not for long without adding in a joke.
You're right. Hopefully, by that time, there's still enough of Ferelden left to save. Good. Now that the warm, fuzzy part of the day is over with, we can get back to the ritual dismemberments. Oh wait, it's not Tuesday, is it?
His backstory is pretty important to the plot, so I won't spoil anything by giving it away. But there's some layers to him, and some of his positive attributes might really shine at the end of the game depending on what choices you make. There's no alignment in Origins, such as good, neutral, or evil, like there is in a lot of other RPGs. Instead, your decisions factor into an approval rating individual to each companion. Since they each have their own unique perspective and personality, they'll perceive your decisions differently. Certain choices you make can also cause them to die, leave your party, or even attack you. Having two companions in your party with different worldviews, like Morrigan and Alistair, will cause them to constantly bicker with each other, which can be pretty funny.
Not see a use for him, I suggest releasing him for mercy's sake alone.
Mercy? I wouldn't have expected that from you.
I would also suggest that Alistair take his place in the cage.
Yes, that's what I would have expected.
If you're worried about conflicting approval ratings, you can rectify this by choosing the correct dialogue responses while talking to your companions individually. Or you can take advantage of the broken gift system, which makes it so easy to max out approval ratings that it basically negates the entire approval system. Which is a shame because otherwise it would have been an interesting feature. I guess that even well-written characters are materialists.
Shoes! We could go shopping together.
The base game is so big on its own that even if BioWare hadn't touched it after its release, I still would have been really impressed by its ambition and scope. But what did they do instead? They released a giant expansion called Awakening and a bunch of DLC. I enjoyed some of these more than others, but even regardless of how I feel about them, BioWare's dedication to this game is commendable. The entirety of this collection comes packaged together in the Ultimate Edition, which is the only version of the game you can currently purchase on Steam and GOG. I'm not going to go into Awakening in depth here, because it's big enough that it would be worthy of a video on its own. You get an entire new campaign that's roughly 15 to 20 hours long. It lets you import your character from the base game with all of their stats and items. There are new specializations, characters, items, talents, a higher level cap, and more. Warden's Keep, The Stone Prisoner, and Return to Ostergard are add-ons that integrate with the base game. Warden's Keep opens up an area called Soldier's Peak, and there's a quest there which I thought was pretty fun. But the best part is the party storage chest you get after you complete it. You can upgrade your backpack to 120 slots throughout the game, but I always struggled to manage my inventory, so this helped out a lot. It also lets you obtain Starfang, one of the most powerful weapons in the game. The Stone Prisoner lets you recruit Shale. Not only does she look cool, but she can also be an effective tank. Behind Alistair, Morrigan, and maybe Sten, she was one of my favorite companions to talk to. Even if you don't keep her in your active party most of the time, you should definitely bring her along when you go to the Deep Roads during the Orzammar questline, because if you do, she'll become a major part of the plot there, and you'll learn about her backstory. Return to Ostergard is exactly what it says it is. It lets you go back to where the Battle of Ostergard took place, and of course there are a whole bunch of Darkspawn waiting there for you. It also adds to the story by giving you some closure on King Kaelin's fate, and you get to keep his armor, which is a really good set. These were the 3 DLC that I enjoyed. Their quests were entertaining enough, and the way that they combined with the base game wasn't intrusive at all, plus the equipment they unlock was really helpful. The remaining DLC are all extra campaigns that you start separate from the main game, and they each last for about 2 hours. Since they're bundled with the Ultimate Edition, there's nothing to complain about price-wise, which is good because I would have felt a little duped if I'd paid extra for these. They're short and they don't add anything all that meaningful to Origin's story. That's not to say that they don't add anything at all, but if you skip them, you're not missing much. The Darkspawn Chronicles flips the narrative and lets you play as the Darkspawn during the game's final battle in Denerim. If I had to pick a favorite of the extra DLC campaigns, it would be this one, because it was kind of cool to see how things unfold from the Darkspawn's perspective, and you actually get to fight against your companions from the base game. Maybe Alistair irritated you with a couple of bad jokes, or maybe Morrigan insulted you one too many times. If so, this DLC is your chance for some payback. Next up is Liliana's song, and it serves as a continuation of her companion quest, although it's a prequel to it. It was impossible for me to take this one seriously because its title kept making me think of that hilarious scene with her singing. You have some new companions in this one, but they were really shallow compared to the base game companions. It also didn't add much to the story that I didn't already know from completing Liliana's companion quest. One thing that it does have going for it is an amazing soundtrack. You might recognize it because I've been using it for parts of this video. The Golems of Amgarak has some challenging combat, so if you're hungry for more of that, you might like this one. You team up with a dwarf, a dinosaur, and a golem, which you can upgrade as you move farther along. The main attraction here is the boss battle at the end. This attractive looking creature is called the Harvester, and it can be really tough to beat on higher difficulty settings. One of Origin's possible endings leaves you with a major cliffhanger involving Morrigan. Even without this ending, there are still some questions left unanswered about her. Don't get your hopes up that the Witch Hunt DLC will answer many of them. It has probably the best writing out of the extra DLC campaigns, but at its conclusion, Morrigan still stays shrouded in mystery. The new companions you get in this one are a bit more entertaining than those in the other DLC. The ending scene with Morrigan is a little anticlimactic if you were looking for a big reveal, but it has some decent moments, and it unfolds partially depending on what choices you made during your interactions with her in the base game. By 2009, when Origins was released, the RPG market was already shifting towards open-world games, but Origins plays more like the classic CRPGs that landed BioWare on the map, and it utilizes in-game decision-making similar to what it was like in Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare combined some of the best elements from some of its best games, with a few tweaks, and this turned out pretty well for them. It was refreshing to go back and play something like this. It's not a perfect game, but I felt that the positive aspects outweighed the negatives. I don't think that it's for everyone though, and that's mostly because of how long it is. With its lengthy narrative and the plethora of slow-paced RPG combat, it can feel like a bit of a slog sometimes, but I thought that it was all worth it in the end. Origins spawned 2 sequels with another upcoming. I don't currently have plans to cover them on this channel, but I won't write off the idea completely. I'd maybe consider doing a full review on Awakening 2, but that's not on the slate for right now either because there are some other games I want to get to. The Ultimate Edition of Dragon Age Origins is $20 on GOG, and for some reason it's $10 more on Steam. But when it goes on sale, you can usually grab it for $5. That's an incredible deal when you take into account the sheer amount of content that it has. If you haven't played it already, and you're looking for an epic fantasy RPG, it's definitely worth checking out.